Hi, I'm Raymond. Welcome to Crimson Kitchen, where the kitchen is red and spaghetti is keto. Now, I know what you're thinking. What? Spaghetti's not keto. Well, if you're thinking that, normally you would be right. Except for, in our case, we're going to make it keto because we're going to replace the pasta with a delicious spaghetti squash. And the sauce, oh man, the sauce. Often when I make keto spaghetti with spaghetti squash, I use Rayo's marinara sauce. Rayo's is very popular in the keto community because it's very low in sugar. But today we're going to make our own sauce using fresh tomatoes. The only sugar that we're going to find in our sauce is the sugar that occurs naturally in the tomatoes. And plus, I feel that the closer you get to the source of your food, the better, the healthier your food is. And that's why I use a lot of organic ingredients. I use organic whenever I can. And I make things as much from scratch as I possibly can. So we got kind of a long video for you. There's a number of steps we have to go through. So let's get started. Okay, now for our ingredients. And I'm going to put the ingredients up on the screen here. If there's any difference between what I say here and what goes on the screen, use what's on the screen because if I add anything or I change anything, with these ingredients that you're seeing on the screen are the last thing that I do as I'm editing the video before I upload it. And so those changes will be reflected there. So I'm going to use medium to large spaghetti squash, baby bella cremini mushrooms. You can use white mushrooms here if you want. I'm going to use 6 fresh tomatoes. You want to get these as fresh as possible. I'm going to use a large white onion, a medium to large bell pepper, and a pound of Italian sausage. Then for the seasonings, I'm going to use of course, it's probably better to mince this up yourself. I have this jar of minced garlic in the refrigerator, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. I'm going to use I'm using coarsely ground pink Himalayan sea salt here. You use whatever kind of salt you like. I'm using 5th season Italian seasoning here. Now, normally I feel like it's kind of cheating a little bit to use these pre-blended seasonings, but this stuff just seems to always have seems to always have the perfect blend of oregano and thyme and whatever other seasonings that they use in there, and it's highly available. I use 5th season, but there's different brands that they all make this pre-blended Italian seasoning, and I recommend it. It's just perfect. And then in addition to that, I'm going to add basil. And then I'm going to add a teaspoon of cayenne pepper because I like a little bit of spiciness, a little bit of kick to my sauce. But that's completely optional, and don't use it if you don't care for it. And then we're going to use some olive oil to saute these things in and to make our to mix with our tomatoes for our sauce, and also to brush the spaghetti squash with. So we're also going to use a little pepper on our spaghetti squash when we brush it with the olive oil. We're going to sprinkle it with a little salt and pepper for seasonings. I think that's it. Now, if I've missed anything or if I change anything, it will be properly reflected on the ingredients that I put on the screen. So go with those. So that's our ingredients, and that's it. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to want to do is preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so while the oven is preheating, we're going to go ahead and cut our spaghetti squash. Okay, so this can be kind of tricky to cut. These things are very tough, and so the way I do it is starting toward the top here, I kind of find the center with my knife and I just kind of stab it, just kind of force my knife down into it. And it's difficult. They're really a tough vegetable, and so you want to be very, very careful here. So then I kind of hold the back of it and just kind of force my knife down. You want to keep your hands well out of the way of the blade there. So get it cut up close to the stem there, and then you'll find that you'll be able to just pull it apart. Okay. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to scrape out all of these seeds and all of these loose strands here in the middle of our spaghetti squash. Okay, for this part, I just use a metal tablespoon and just scrape these seeds right out of here into the side of the sink that has the garbage disposal. I find that they don't really give my garbage disposal a hard time. It doesn't seem to have a problem with them, so I just rake them right into the garbage disposal. And there we go, good enough. We've got these little strands left in there, but that's okay. They don't hurt anything. We just don't want any seeds. Okay, now we're going to take a tablespoon of olive oil and we're just going to brush, using a brush, we're just going to brush the inside of the spaghetti squash. And there we go. Now we want to salt and pepper this. Again, I'm using coarsely ground Himalayan sea salt. Use whatever you like. I'm not really measuring here. I would guess this is probably coming to about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Half a teaspoon of salt. Probably half a teaspoon of coarsely ground fresh black pepper. Just salt and pepper to taste. Okay, and then we're going to set the spaghetti squash aside. Let it soak up that olive oil for a few moments, and we're going to go ahead and cut our tomatoes. We're going to cut our tomatoes into fourths, and then we're going to cut off just the stem portion. Okay, now we're going to dice our bell pepper. Okay, next we're going to dice our onion. And all I'm doing with these mushrooms is just breaking them up just a little bit. I don't want them too small, but I don't want this great big slices of mushroom in there. Next, we're going to take a baking sheet, cover it with parchment paper. We're going to put the spaghetti squash face down, cut side down, on the baking sheet. The oven is preheated now, so we're going to go put this in the oven. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our spaghetti squash in the oven, and we're going to set the timer for 40 minutes. And that's when we'll check it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our tomatoes that we've cut into fourths into a blender or a food processor. I use a blender here. I'm going to go ahead and add 3 tablespoons of this Italian seasoning. And I'm going to go ahead and add a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Now, as I said, this is completely optional. going to definitely add some kick. The basil will go in later. And so I'm going to blend this for a full minute. Okay, you can see that's well blended. The seasonings are well blended in there. It's got a nice color. So now let's work on our vegetables. Okay, so what I've done here is I have preheated 3 tablespoons of olive oil over a medium-high heat. And we're going to start with the garlic, the minced garlic. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. I'm going to let that garlic cook in that medium-high, in that olive oil over a medium-high heat for just a moment. Now we're going to add all of these wonderful chopped and diced vegetables. And while these vegetables saute in this olive oil over a medium-high heat, we are going to take a large pot and we're going to pour our tomato sauce in there. We're going to begin to heat it over a medium-high heat. Now we're going to cook these vegetables just until the mushrooms release their water, and about that time the tomato sauce should be coming to a boil. So we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, it's been 3 or 4 minutes, and you can see here, hopefully you can see here, that these vegetables have released a lot of water. And that's okay, we want that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to consolidate these. We're going to bring this was on a medium-high heat as well, and you can see that the sauce is beginning to, just beginning to boil. Now we're going to put these vegetables, with all of the olive oil, all of the water that have cooked out of them, everything, we're going to put them in that tomato sauce. Lots of flavors cooked together in there. It's just wonderful. What you see here, we're going to mix all of these up really well. I'm going to let that sauce continue to come to a boil. Leave this over a medium-high heat. We want that sauce to come to a good boil. And we'll be right back. Okay, it's been a couple more minutes here, and I think you can see our sauce has come to a good boil. And what we want to do now is we want to back this heat down just a little bit. Let's back it down to a medium heat. We want to watch this. What we want to do is we want to back it down till it's got a good simmer. We want to make sure it continues to simmer. We don't want to bring it down below that. We want it to simmer, and we're going to let it simmer for a good long time. What we want to happen is we want this, we want the water to boil off of the tomatoes, and we want this sauce to thicken up. And so we're going to simmer it for a good long time, 45 minutes, and probably a bit longer. We want to give it a good opportunity to thicken up. So we're going to let that simmer for quite a while, and we will be back. You can see here we've got a nice simmer, and this is about the simmer that you want here, the simmer that we've got going right here. It's been about 20 minutes, but we're back because it is time to take the spaghetti squash out of the oven. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so our spaghetti squash is coming up, and that's what she looks like right there. I'm going to take our tongs and turn this over. Oh, it's beautiful. Alright, that spaghetti squash is going to need about 5 to 10 minutes to cool. So we're going to set it aside. And while that cools, we're going to brown our Italian sausage. Okay. So I'm going to let this Italian sausage brown. I'm going to break it up over a medium heat. Okay. So we've got our Italian sausage browning, our sauce simmering, our spaghetti squash cooling, and when this is brown, we will be right back. Okay, so you can see the Italian sausage is brown. At this point, you might, if you like, drain some of the fat off of it. I'm not. If you do, I would recommend just draining some and leaving some, because on keto, we're not afraid of that fat. You know, we're afraid of starchy carbs and sugary carbs, but that good saturated fat, that doesn't scare us at all. So I'm going to slide this sauce over there, and you can see we still got the nice simmer going. And we're going to add the Italian sausage to the sauce. Give that a good mix there. And we're going to let that continue to simmer. It's at this point that we want to add our 2 teaspoons of basil. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of pink Himalayan sea salt. Our spaghetti squash is cooled now, and we're going to let that continue to simmer while we go and prepare that. So if you'll come with me over to the counter, we'll do that. This is the magic of spaghetti squash. If you happen to have never worked with this stuff before, I like to do this with a combination of tongs like this and a fork. But you can just sort of take and pull this stuff up, and you can see it comes out in strands, very much like pasta. See that? See strands of squash. And we're going to use that exactly the same way as we would use pasta. Also, another tip that I read about this one time that I thought was a really neat idea, you can work this spaghetti squash loose right inside of this shell, and then you can use it for a serving dish. It makes a fun little serving dish, especially if you have a smaller one that you could use for just one serving. Okay, all told, this sauce has been simmering for about an hour now, about the last 15 minutes with the smoked sausage and the basil in it. And normally what I would do is I would just ladle this right out of the pot, but because this is my YouTube channel, I'm going to pour this into the serving dish, so hopefully you can see how absolutely delicious this looks. Guys, I am thrilled about this. Okay, so if you will join me at the table, we will give this a taste test. Okay, ready for a taste test here. You can see, hopefully you can see here, I've topped this, I don't know if you can see, I've topped this with some shredded Parmesan cheese. Okay, so I'm having some wine with this. I'm no wine connoisseur, so, you know, I just know what I like, and I use this I've been getting this blended red called 19 Crimes. Honestly, I don't know if this is a good wine or not. I just know that I like it. Any of you watching this, if you're a wine connoisseur, please feel free to tell me what wine I should be drinking with this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and give this a try. You can see how the spaghetti squash is very pasta-like in its texture and its consistency there. Not quite in its taste. It doesn't quite taste like pasta. I mean, we don't want it to. It's not pasta, so we're just going to enjoy it for what it is. So let's see what what we got here. Guys, I am not kidding. That sauce. Please try this sauce. This is not going to go on my quick and easy playlist. That's for sure. There was some work involved in this. My kitchen is destroyed right now. But there is just something about making things like this from scratch. If I had grown these tomatoes, oh my God, I would be ecstatic right now. But this is so, so delicious. When you make that sauce out of those fresh tomatoes like that, there's this zestiness of fresh tomatoes that really comes through. And then all of these vegetables in there, and how long that we simmered it for, and how those flavors blended. Oh my God, it is just so delicious. I mean, it's really hard to explain. Sure, I mean, you can throw some Rayo spaghetti sauce and some Italian sausage together, and it's pretty good. Put it on top of some spaghetti squash, and it's good, and I do that a lot. I do that when I'm pressed for time, and Jordan really likes it, but I spent the entire evening tonight preparing this, and oh, it is so delicious. Guys, I can't encourage you enough to give this recipe a try. So guys, I'm going to just go ahead and enjoy my dinner and my wine now, and thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're sitting down and enjoying yours, and please consider giving me a like and a subscribe. You can click the little alert button down there, and you'll get a notification whenever I post a new recipe or a new lifestyle video or whatever. Share with your friends if you've got people who are thinking about doing keto or who are doing keto, or if you've really enjoyed this. Helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate you watching my video. I mean that from the heart. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time, guys, on Crimson Kitchen.